The room was silent, yet every heartbeat seemed amplified. Cameras blinked, microphones leaned in, and the air carried a tension that could have been cut with a knife. Every eye in the courtroom, or was it a debate hall, was fixed on the two figures at the center of it all. On one side, Alan Dershowitz, the seasoned legal titan, perched with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention, his smirk a practiced mask of superiority. On the other, Jasmine Crockett standing tall, calm and unwavering, radiating a quiet confidence that seemed to pulse against the electricity in the air. Dershowitz leaned forward, his voice smooth but sharp, dripping with condescension. "Miss Crockett," he said, every syllable deliberate. "For someone with a law degree, your understanding of constitutional nuance is quaint, isn't it?" A subtle chuckle escaped him, a low, self-assured sound meant to puncture and unsettle. The crowd shifted, some tensing, others murmuring, unsure whether to gasp or giggle, caught between fascination and disbelief. Cameras swiveled to catch the flicker of Crockett's reaction, each frame ready to immortalize what would come next. Crockett's eyes never wavered, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, not mocking, not fearful, but measured, almost imperceptible. The whispers grew, the subtle shifting of bodies hinting at anticipation. People leaned forward, sensing that the real story wasn't the insult, but the response. Every moment stretched, every second was a taut thread of suspense. Dershowitz, sensing the hesitation, let the silence hang just a heartbeat longer. The audacity of his tone, the weight of his reputation, the centuries of courtroom dominance he seemed to carry in his presence, all of it pressed against Crockett like a storm. But she stood, unmoved, a figure of calm in the eye of it. The cameras caught the sparkle of intelligence in her eyes, the almost imperceptible shift of her shoulders, readying herself not to react, but to strike with precision. And then, with the room holding its collective breath, she opened her mouth. The words that followed cut through the tension like a lightning strike. What she said next left everyone, including Dershowitz, speechless. The moment stretched into eternity, a pivot upon which the entire narrative of arrogance and dignity would turn, leaving the audience suspended, waiting, wondering what form the coming reckoning would take. This was not just another courtroom exchange, it was a collision of worlds, a moment loaded with meaning far beyond the walls of the room. Jasmine Crockett had risen steadily, her name whispered in political circles, praised on social media, and celebrated in communities that had long been overlooked. She embodied more than legal acumen. She represented a new generation of leaders who carried the weight of identity, history, and resilience into every public arena. And now, she faced Alan Dershowitz, a figure synonymous with elitism, a man whose sharp tongue and storied career had intimidated countless opponents before her. Dershowitz's barb about her law degree was no random insult. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine, to remind the audience that he and the institutions he represented held authority. It was a calculated assertion of dominance, a reminder that credibility was not given. It was earned through pedigree, connections, and reputation, at least, according to him. He leaned into centuries of privilege, assuming that the weight of his name alone could overshadow her accomplishment. But Crockett's presence told a different story. Every gaze that lingered on her, every murmur in the crowd, reflected not doubt, but expectation. She had earned her place through determination, intellect, and an unwavering sense of justice. The tension in the room was intensified by layers that went beyond politics or legal expertise. Generational shifts were at play, a younger, more diverse electorate, watching an older establishment figure attempt to diminish a rising star. Gender dynamics crackled beneath the surface, the subtle assumptions about authority and worth that often burdened women in positions of power. And the racial context, unspoken but unmistakable, added yet another layer. A black woman standing her ground, claiming legitimacy in a sphere historically dominated by white men. Every word Dershowitz spoke carried echoes of history, and every pause in Crockett's measured composure reminded the audience that she was more than capable of rewriting the script. Crockett's growing prominence was not accidental. It was the culmination of years of advocacy, legal victories, and a commitment to communities whose voices were often silent. This confrontation was the moment those communities had been waiting for, a public stage upon which her expertise, poise, and intellect could not merely be observed, but validated. Dershowitz's attack, intended to diminish, instead amplified the stake. The contrast between his arrogance and her calm competence framed the battle as more than personal. It was emblematic of the ongoing struggle between outdated elitism and emerging leadership, rooted in inclusivity and principle. And yet, the room remained suspended in anticipation. Every camera lens, every whisper, every furrowed brow and stifled gasp contributed to a pressure that felt almost physical. The world outside the courtroom was watching, social feeds ready to explode, commentators poised to dissect every syllable, every No one, not Dershowitz, not the audience, not even the cameras themselves were prepared for what was coming. The tension coiled tighter, the energy crackling like static in the air. The truth Crockett was about to deliver was not just clever or pointed, it was transformative. It had the power to redefine perception, to shift narratives, and to leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. And as the moment drew closer, the unspoken understanding hung in the air. History was about to watch and the world was waiting for her to speak. The world was watching, and no one was ready for the truth she was about to deliver. Alan Dershowitz was a man whose reputation preceded him. To millions, his name was synonymous with courtroom brilliance, relentless advocacy, and a voice that could slice through the chaos of legal debates like a scalpel. He had defended high-profile clients, argued before the nation, and become a fixture on television panels, delivering commentary with a confidence that seemed absolute. His every word carried weight, every gesture calculated to signal mastery, every pause a reminder of experience honed over decades. To watch him in action was to witness a performer fully aware of the stage he commanded, a man who had spent a lifetime mastering not just the law but the art of persuasion, intimidation, and spectacle. Dershowitz's arrogance was cultivated, almost ritualistic. He had long since learned that condescension could be a weapon as sharp as any legal argument. A dismissive smirk, a pointed question, a casual correction of a younger lawyer's phrasing, these were his tools. They reminded audiences, opponents, and colleagues alike that he belonged to an elite echelon, a rarefied space where intellect, experience, and fame were currency. For decades, this strategy had worked flawlessly. Countless challengers had crumbled under the weight of his verbal dominance. Their arguments diminished, their confidence chipped away until he alone seemed unassailable. Media appearances only enhanced his persona. On camera, Dershowitz exuded authority, charisma, and a subtle intimidation. Networks knew that a clip of him analyzing a case, or delivering a pointed critique, could spark viral moments. He had built a reputation not only as a legal mind, but as a figure who could control narratives, dominate discussions, and shape public opinion. His words carried the sheen of inevitability. When Dershowitz spoke, the world listened, and often it believed. In many ways, this cultivated image was as powerful as any legal victory he had claimed in a courtroom. Yet, beneath the polished veneer was a pattern of dismissiveness. Time and again, Dershowitz had used his platform to belittle opponents, subtly eroding their credibility while bolstering his own. Whether in the courtroom, on television, or in public discourse, he relied on the assumption that authority alone was sufficient to silence challengers. He had rarely met an adversary who refused to bend to the pressure of reputation, a counterpart who could match intellect with calm, poise with principle, and resilience with confidence. His dominance had rarely been questioned, and certainly, it had never been challenged in quite this way. The contrast with Jasmine Crockett was immediate, almost jarring. Here was a rising figure whose preparation was meticulous, whose presence was steady, and whose intellect was formidable. Yet Dershowitz, conditioned by decades of victories over those who faltered under his gaze, underestimated her. He saw a younger lawyer, a woman, and a black woman at that, and assumed that the weight of his name, his experience and his reputation would suffice to dominate the exchange. What he did not anticipate was the depth of Crockett's preparation, the clarity of her thought, and the quiet confidence that radiated from her every gesture. Dershowitz's career had been defined by moments of control. He thrived when the narrative bent in his favor, when audiences, courtroom, television, or social media were positioned to witness his mastery. He had orchestrated debates, guided discussions, and turned confrontations into spectacles that reinforced his authority. To him, power was an extension of intellect, a visible proof of accomplishment, and a reminder to the world of his place at the apex of the legal hierarchy. Yet, as the cameras focused on the poised figure across from him, Dershowitz sensed, perhaps for the first time in decades, that control was no longer guaranteed. Every advantage he had relied upon, prestige, reputation, experience, was about to be tested in an unprecedented way. His carefully cultivated aura of inevitability would meet a force of calm, intellect, and dignity that refused to be diminished. And though he had faced many opponents, few had ever forced him to reconsider the assumptions that guided his interaction. Crockett's presence, her quiet confidence, and her unwavering composure were a silent challenge to the narrative he had long dominated. The tension was unmistakable. He prepared to deliver his next line, certain that it would secure his superiority, unaware that the foundation upon which he had built decades of dominance was about to shift. His words meant to belittle would inadvertently set the stage for one of the most dramatic reversals of control in recent memory. The audience, already captivated, leaned forward instinctively, sensing that the predictable rhythm of dominance was about to be disrupted. Yet his next attempt to humiliate her would backfire spectacularly. Jasmine Crockett's story began long before the bright lights of debate halls and courtrooms ever illuminated her path. She was raised in a world that often demanded more from those who carried the weight of identity and ambition. From a young age she understood that intellect alone would not suffice. Perseverance, resilience, and unshakable dignity were the tools that would carve her trajectory. Her parents, both of whom navigated systemic barriers themselves, instilled in her a deep understanding of the value of education, the necessity of advocacy, and the moral responsibility that came with privilege and opportunity. These early lessons were the foundation upon which she would build her career, and they would later inform every word she uttered when the stakes were highest. Education was Crockett's first proving ground. She excelled academically, consistently pushing beyond expectations, yet she encountered the subtle and overt barriers that have historically constrained women, and particularly women of color, in legal and political spaces. Professors who underestimated her, peers who doubted her capabilities, and institutions that assumed conformity over innovation, all of it became part of her training. Each challenge was met not with defiance, but with quiet focus and relentless preparation. Her law degree, the same credential Dershowitz would later mock, was not merely a paper, it was the product of years of determination, late nights, and intellectual rigor, earned against odds that might have discouraged a lesser spirit. Crockett's law career became a laboratory for resilience. She took cases that demanded not only legal expertise but emotional fortitude, cases that others might have deemed too complex or politically risky. She represented communities whose voices were marginalized, individuals whose rights were threatened, and causes that required navigating entrenched power structures. Each victory, each argument, each moment spent translating law into meaningful change, added a layer to her growing reputation. She learned to speak with authority, to listen with patience, and to wield intellect as both a shield and a sword. The courtroom, with its calculated tension and high stakes, became a familiar arena where her abilities could flourish without surrendering her principle. Yet public life brought a new dimension of scrutiny. As Crockett gained prominence, she was examined not only for her legal acumen, but for her every decision, every word, every public appearance. The glare of the media, the judgment of commentators, and the expectations of her supporters created a crucible in which character was tested daily. She faced critiques that were often unfair, comments tinged with bias or doubt, yet she remained steadfast, relying on preparation, evidence, and an unshakable sense of justice to guide her responses. Each obstacle she overcame, each slight she endured, reinforced a quiet confidence. She was prepared not for mere performance, but for meaningful impact. Personal sacrifices underpinned her ascent. Long hours, missed social events, and moments of exhaustion were invisible to most observers, yet they formed the backbone of her success. Friends and colleagues could see her composure, but few understood the discipline, the deliberate focus, and the emotional labor invested in every decision she made. Her intellect was sharpened through rigorous study, her empathy honed by listening to stories of struggle, her dignity fortified by a commitment to stand, even when doing so invited scrutiny or ridicule. Every experience, both triumphant and challenging, had prepared her for the exact confrontation she was about to face. Crockett's rise was also a symbol, for those who saw themselves reflected in her story, young professionals, immigrants, women, people of color. She embodied possibility. She demonstrated that barriers could be challenged, assumptions questioned, and respect earned through competence, courage, and character. The anticipation surrounding her confrontation with Dershowitz was fueled not only by curiosity but by a recognition that her response would be a declaration of values as much as a legal or rhetorical maneuver. As the camera zoomed in and the murmurs of the crowd swelled,
Crockett approached the podium. Every step was measured, a reflection of confidence, built over years of preparation. The weight of history, expectation, and personal investment rested lightly on her shoulders, carried not as a burden but as a responsibility she had long embraced. The crowd's collective attention, the flashing lenses, the sharp inhale of those waiting for the first word, they all converged on her, yet she remained poised, the calm eye within a storm of scrutiny. Every glance from Dershowitz, every subtle shift in the room, met her composure with unyielding grace. She was not merely ready to respond, she was ready to define the narrative, to assert the authority earned through intellect, effort, and moral clarity. The room leaned in collectively, sensing the impending pivot, the moment when preparation would meet opportunity, when dignity would confront arrogance. The suspense was palpable, the air thick with expectation. Jasmine Crockett's journey had been long, and every trial, every lesson, every moment of perseverance, had been leading her here. She paused, inhaled, and positioned herself to speak, fully aware that this was not merely a confrontation, but a defining moment in which all the forces of doubt, elitism, and condescension would collide with a lifetime of preparation, resolve, and unwavering intellect. The moment Crockett opened her mouth, the room seemed to inhale as one, yet before her words fully landed, Dershowitz leaned forward again, his eyes narrowing, a subtle smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Miss Crockett," he said, his tone sharpened like a scalpel, "while your enthusiasm is admirable, one wonders if your legal training has truly prepared you for issues of this magnitude." The words were calculated to sting, to unsettle, and to reassert the dominance he had long wielded with effortless precision. Cameras pivoted to capture her response, the lenses hungry for the drama that was unfolding in real time. Crockett remained calm. Her expression betrayed nothing, yet her eyes held quiet fire. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, giving their full weight to the audience. Every second of silence stretched tension into a palpable force. Whispers rustled through the crowd. Some leaned forward, others exchanged glances, sensing that the apparent power dynamic might be more fragile than it seemed. The murmurs were a soft undercurrent to the clash of authority and poise at the front of the room. Dershowitz pressed on, each phrase sharpened with subtle derision. "You may have the credentials, Miss Crockett, but credentials alone do not guarantee judgment, experience, or nuance. One hopes that your arguments today are more than the sum of your papers and diploma." His voice carried both challenge and condescension, a deliberate attempt to rattle her composure. The crowd shifted again. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett's serene posture, her measured breathing, the slight tilt of her head that conveyed both attention and quiet readiness. Every micro-expression became a battlefield where credibility, perception, and authority collided.
Yet Crockett spoke not in haste. Her tone was calm, deliberate, and precise. Each phrase was chosen for impact, her pauses measured to allow the weight of her preparation to resonate. She acknowledged the points, reframed them with clarity, and subtly challenged assumptions without raising her voice. The contrast between her composed demeanor and Dershowitz's pointed aggression created a tension that drew the audience deeper into the exchange. It was a dance of intellect and instinct, where restraint carried more power than sharpness, and dignity spoke louder than ridicule. The crowd responded, though quietly at first. A nod here, a small intake of breath there, a few restrained smiles rippling through observers who sensed that something unexpected was unfolding. Dershowitz's confident smirk began to falter imperceptibly. The certainty he had carried into the room now encountered a challenge he had not fully anticipated. His pauses grew longer, his tone more measured, as if recalibrating mid-attack. The cameras captured it all. The frown, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible hesitation in his next words. The debate escalated with intensity, each exchange sharpening the contrast between arrogance and composure. Every attempt by Dershowitz to dominate verbally was met with Crockett's calm, poised responses, and every rebuttal she offered seemed to slowly chip away at his assuredness. The audience felt it, the shift in momentum, the unspoken realization that the predictable pattern of authority might be cracking. The room itself seemed to lean in collectively, waiting for the next pivot, for the moment when preparation would finally meet opportunity in a decisive turn. It seemed Dershowitz had the upper hand, as if history, reputation, and media dominance might carry the day. Yet in that delicate balance, a single sentence delivered with quiet authority would change everything. The pause before it landed was infinitesimal, yet every heartbeat in the room stretched in anticipation, the air taut with expectation, and the cameras ready to capture the moment the narrative would shift irreversibly. Jasmine Crockett's gaze swept the room, calm but unwavering, absorbing the tension that Dershowitz had tried to manufacture. The silence lingered for a heartbeat, pregnant with expectation, as if the entire room had collectively paused to wait for her to speak. Then she began, her voice steady, her cadence deliberate, each word carrying a weight that demanded attention without ever rising to force. She did not rush, did not lean into anger or defensiveness. Instead, she allowed the quiet power of preparation and intellect to fill the space. "Mr. Dershowitz," she began, her tone respectful yet firm, "you speak of credentials as though they alone determine understanding. Yet it is through experience, commitment, and dedication to the communities we serve that true judgment is forged." Each word was chosen, precise, cutting through the assumptions that had been layered upon her. She let the point linger just long enough for the audience to absorb it, for the weight of her assertion to settle in the minds of everyone present. The murmurs quieted further, an almost imperceptible shift as attention centered fully on her. Crockett continued, her phrasing measured, almost conversational, yet each sentence built a crescendo of credibility. "I have represented clients who faced systemic barriers, communities that have been historically overlooked, and individuals whose voices were silenced by the very institutions that are meant to protect them. Through each case, I have learned that the law is not merely an instrument of power, it is a responsibility, a means of ensuring justice, fairness, and equity." Her words were not defensive, they were declarative, a reminder that her authority came from action, not entitlement. The audience absorbed every syllable, some leaning forward instinctively, others nodding in quiet affirmation. Dershowitz's face, once confident, began to tighten. The smirk that had punctuated his earlier remarks faded, replaced by a subtle furrow of the brow, a shift that betrayed the slightest unease. He had faced brilliant opponents before, yet the combination of Crockett's calm authority and meticulous evidence presented a challenge he had not anticipated. He attempted to interject, but the pause she allowed before continuing rendered any interruption futile. A masterclass in timing and control, Crockett's rebuttal moved from general principles to specific points, each one a carefully laid brick in the foundation of her argument. She referenced key cases, highlighted her involvement in legislation, and subtly underscored her victories in both the courtroom and public service. Yet she did all of this without raising her voice, without a hint of defensiveness. Her intellectual precision was punctuated by rhetorical elegance. The cadence of her delivery forced every listener to reconcile the disparity between Dershowitz's condescension and her composure. The room responded instinctively. Gasps echoed softly through the crowd at the finesse of her argument. Subtle nods of approval spread like a ripple through journalists, legal observers, and public spectators alike. Applause, tentative at first, began to swell as the clarity and force of her points became undeniable. Each reaction reinforced the growing tension. Dershowitz's dominance was slipping, replaced by a quiet, formidable authority radiating from Crockett. The cameras captured it all, the tightening jaw, the flicker of doubt, the almost imperceptible shift in posture, as Dershowitz realized that the narrative he had relied on for decades was being dismantled in real time. Social media feeds, though not live in the room, were imagined as they erupted across platforms, tweets highlighting her eloquence, memes framing the moment as a triumph of intellect over arrogance, pundits scrambling to contextualize the unexpected reversal of authority. The virtual audience, like the physical one, collectively recognized the spectacle of a hero asserting dignity and mastery under pressure. Crockett then paused, letting her next point land with deliberate force. It is easy to dismiss credentials, to belittle achievement when one assumes that entitlement and history are sufficient measures of value. Yet real expertise is earned through the lives we touch, the justice we pursue, and the courage we demonstrate when faced with skepticism, bias. True authority is not assumed, it is proven. Her eyes met Dershowitz's, unflinching, challenging him in a way that transcended the immediate confrontation. The audience felt it, a transfer of energy, a seismic shift from dominance to respect. Every subsequent statement she made further chipped away at the carefully constructed aura of superiority Dershowitz had relied upon. She interwove examples of her advocacy, her legislative work, and her courtroom successes, each delivered with rhythmic precision. The language was exacting, yet accessible, designed to resonate not only with legal minds, but with the hearts of those invested in justice and representation. Each point was a reaffirmation of capability, a quiet dismantling of condescension. The collective effect was almost palpable. Murmurs grew into audible exclamations of surprise. Journalists shifted in their seats. Cameras panned to capture the moment from multiple angles, and Dershowitz's confidence continued to erode, his attempts at interruption futile against the steady cadence of Crockett's logic. Social media commentary, though imagined in the room, added to the perception of victory. Hashtags praising her poise trended instantly, pundits acknowledged the skill of her rebuttal, and clips were already circulating, framing the moment as one where arrogance had been decisively confronted by intellect and composure. By the time she concluded, the room was transformed. Crockett's dignity and intellectual mastery radiated like a beacon. Dershowitz's condescension had faltered under the weight of preparation, eloquence, and moral clarity. The applause was not merely recognition, it was validation, a tangible acknowledgement that the battle of authority had shifted irreversibly. Every nod, every whisper, every camera frame reinforced a singular truth. In this confrontation, intellect paired with calm, preparation and principle had triumphed over arrogance, entitlement, and superficial dominance. Crockett stepped back slightly, eyes still steady, a faint controlled smile acknowledging the magnitude of the moment. She had not raised her voice, she had not resorted to theatrics, and yet the room knew a pivotal shift had occurred. The arc of expectation had reversed. The crowd, the cameras, and the imagined social feeds had all borne witness to a masterful dismantling of assumed authority. The emotional punch was unmistakable. The hero's intellect and dignity shone brightly, and the villain's condescension crumbled under the weight of calm mastery. The moment Jasmine Crockett finished her response, the room did not simply return to normal, it seemed to vibrate with the energy of what had just transpired. Cameras lingered, capturing faces frozen in awe, journalists scribbling notes furiously, and audience members exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Clips of the confrontation began to circulate instantly, snippets of her measured, piercing rebuttal hitting social media like wildfire. Hashtags praising her poise, intellect and composure began trending within minutes, creating a digital echo chamber where admiration multiplied exponentially. Politicians weighed in almost immediately. Social media feeds lit up with praise from colleagues, and even ideological opponents, acknowledging her mastery of both law and rhetoric. Comments ranged from pointed respect for her preparedness, to broader reflections on what her victory represented, the triumph of knowledge and composure over arrogance and dismissiveness. Legal analysts dissected every line she delivered, highlighting the precision of her argumentation, the clarity of her logic, and the way she had dismantled decades of assumed dominance without ever raising her voice. Celebrities and influencers joined the chorus, amplifying the narrative that this was more than a personal victory, it was a cultural moment. Tweets, posts and videos celebrated not just Crockett's intellect, but the symbolic resonance of her success. For many, she became an emblem of dignity in the face of condescension, an affirmation that preparation, perseverance, and composure could overcome entrenched hierarchies. Memes quickly emerged, some humorous, some serious, all underscoring the stark contrast between arrogance and calm authority. The digital conversation mirrored the physical reaction of the crowd, a testament to the way her performance had transcended the confines of the room. The cultural weight of the moment rippled beyond social media. Talk shows, podcasts, and news panels dissected the exchange for hours, exploring its implications for gender, race, and generational power dynamics. Analysts praised her ability to stand firm under scrutiny, framing it as a triumph for women in positions of authority, particularly women of color navigating spaces historically dominated by men. The narrative was clear. Crockett's poise was not just a personal victory, it was a statement about the evolving standards of leadership, intellect, and dignity in public life. Legal communities were equally electrified. Law students, young lawyers and activists shared clips and commentary, marveling at the elegance with which Crockett had handled herself. They noted the subtle rhetorical strategies she employed, the way she layered evidence with calm, and how she transformed what could have been a moment of humiliation into a showcase of competence and integrity. For many, this was an instructional example, a masterclass in handling confrontation with both intellect and composure. Even the mainstream media acknowledged the shift. Headlines emphasized the unexpected reversal of authority, framing Crockett as the figure who turned condescension into an opportunity for recognition and respect. Commentators highlighted the broader social resonance,
Here was a moment that transcended politics, reflecting the public's desire to see merit, preparation, and dignity triumph over arrogance and entitlement. It was a victory felt not just by Crockett herself, but by communities who had long seen their capabilities underestimated or dismissed. The impact was immediate, but also symbolic. Crockett's performance sparked conversations about generational change, about the importance of preparation, and about how true authority is earned, not assumed. Discussions extended to classrooms, offices, and living rooms, as people debated the implications for leadership, equality, and public service. Every retweet, every article, every shared clip amplified the moment, transforming a single confrontation into a cultural touchstone that would be referenced for months to come. And yet, even as the room settled and the digital world erupted, the story was far from over. Commentators speculated, audiences analyzed, and social feeds buzzed with anticipation of what would happen next. The victory was undeniable, the recognition widespread, and yet an undercurrent of suspense remained. Everyone who had witnessed the exchange, both physically and virtually, sensed that the ramifications of this moment would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. And just when everyone thought the story was over, the ripple effect reached far beyond the room. In the wake of the confrontation, Jasmine Crockett took a moment to reflect, not just for herself, but for everyone watching. The applause had faded, the cameras had paused, but the lesson of the exchange lingered in the air like a tangible force. She understood that what had transpired was larger than a debate, larger than a single insult, and larger than any individual ego. It was a demonstration of the enduring power of preparation, of calm intellect, and of the quiet authority that comes from standing firmly in one's principles. Crockett reframed the encounter not as a victory over Alan Dershowitz, but as a triumph of dignity over arrogance. She emphasized that confrontation, when met with measured composure, becomes an opportunity to illuminate truth rather than escalate hostility. Mockery may grab attention, she noted, but intellect paired with calm, evidence, and poise commands lasting respect. Her words carried the weight of experience, of countless hours spent preparing, studying, and advocating for those whose voices are too often ignored. In reframing the moment, she elevated it from a clash of personalities to a universal lesson in character. The inspirational takeaway was clear: calmness and preparation are more formidable than derision and entitlement. In a society often obsessed with the loudest voice or the most flamboyant display, Crockett's approach reminded viewers that real power lies in mastery of knowledge, strategic patience, and moral clarity. Her poise was not passive, it was active, deliberate, and intentional. By meeting arrogance with unwavering confidence, she demonstrated that respect is not demanded, it is earned through integrity, effort, and thoughtful action. Crockett also tied the confrontation to a broader truth that resonates across communities and generations. It is not credentials alone that define a person, but the manner in which they carry them. Achievement is hollow without character. Education is diminished if not paired with application, empathy, and courage. It's not credentials alone, she articulated, her voice measured. It's how you carry them that defines respect. The audience, both live and virtual, understood the resonance. Her words transcended the specific exchange, offering guidance for anyone navigating spaces where authority is questioned, underestimated, or challenged. The cinematic clarity of the moment lay in the contrast between what had been and what had emerged. Arrogance, no matter how polished, is fleeting when measured against true composure. Mockery dissipates in the face of reasoned argument and principled confidence. The cameras captured subtle nods, the quiet approval of the room, and the enduring image of a hero who had transformed an attempted humiliation into a lesson that could ripple outward, inspiring countless others. As the moral crescendo built, the lesson became undeniable. Dignity, preparation, and intellect are forces that outlast the transient power of condescension. Crockett's handling of the confrontation served as a reminder that every challenge carries within it the potential to redefine perception, assert authority, and leave a lasting imprint. In every pause, in every carefully chosen phrase, she demonstrated that mastery over oneself, one's craft, and one's principles can render even the most formidable antagonist powerless. The final reflection resonated with both subtlety and force. She understood that her moment in the spotlight was not just for herself, but for the communities and individuals who had long been underestimated, marginalized, or doubted. By standing firm, by responding with clarity and poise, she embodied a truth that would endure far beyond the confines of the debate room or courtroom. Alan Dershowitz entered the room expecting to dominate, to belittle, and to assert the authority he had wielded. For decades, he sought to humiliate Jasmine Crockett, to reduce her accomplishments to a dismissive joke about credentials and pedigree. But what he encountered was something entirely different, a poised, prepared, and resolute force of intellect and dignity that refused to bend under condescension. Crockett did not merely respond, she transformed the moment into a testament to what true leadership, preparation, and calm composure can achieve. Her mastery of the room, her careful articulation, and her unwavering confidence reminded everyone present and everyone watching beyond the cameras that intelligence and preparation are far more enduring than arrogance or mockery. She proved that a measured, principled approach can dismantle condescension without ever raising a hand, a voice, or a temper. It was a clear, universal lesson. Credibility and respect are earned through knowledge, integrity, and poise, not assumed through reputation or status. This moment resonates far beyond the confines of a single debate or confrontation. It is a call to recognize and celebrate voices that challenge arrogance, elevate truth, and embody dignity in the face of ridicule. If you believe in voices like Jasmine Crockett's, share this, subscribe, and help amplify stories of truth, dignity, and courage. Let her example remind us that preparation, intellect, and moral clarity are forces that can redefine narratives, inspire communities, and challenge even the most entrenched power. The world watched, she answered, and history remembered her calm.